Tēnā koe te e rere ana ngā mihi ma te koe kia koe te e nā mai ngā whakahiko hara mai nei, kei raro te rorohiko. Tuatahi, e te rangatira e Moruhu MacDonald, e kore koe wariwaritia, aha koa pahure te wā e hoki tonu ana o mātou whakaro ki a koe i tēnei rā o te maumaharatanga, ki tōna māramatanga, ki tōna wairua, kei te rere tonu i wainga nui a mātou. Uki mai rā e te pāpā. Ki o koutou e te hunga ora, ka nui te mihi aroha anō ki o koutou. I'm really conscious that this is a session that was supposed to be some time ago and we deferred it to, because of the passing of our rangatira, and that Heidi has been sharing in the tissues of the maumahara for him this morning with his whānau. So it feels appropriate to just pause for a moment and to acknowledge his activism, both ātinana and through his intellectualism as we move into this space, which is about and honouring his legacy and the many legacies of others, because literature reviews are really about the whakapapa of ideas, and I think that Moruhu has given us such a rich legacy of how he has woven that art of the whakapapa of ideas. So I know that many will have him sitting in your hearts today, particularly, and lots of days when you're deep in the world of thinking and researching. And I didn't have much of an opportunity to spend time with him because I'm a rookie and a newbie into the world of Te Wānanga Aotearoa, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity and looking forward to connecting with as many of you as I can, ātinana, to hopefully be helpful in your respective forays into the world of Rangahau. So, so the purpose of this is to talk about literature reviews. If Rangahau is something that you do all the time, this might not be the most exciting way you've spent a Friday, but hopefully there'll be at least a couple of jokes that provide good value for your time. It tried to gear it for, I think there's a difference in your orientation. Literature reviews can feel like you're hanging out a tribe of little people's socks on the washing line, painful and endless. Or if you're wired a different way, it can be as joyful as a mud spa in Rotorua, which the team did last week while I was probably hanging out little people's socks actually on the line. And so he very much tried to orient this. If your way of feeling about literature reviews is more the hanging lots of little people's socks on the washing line. And the starting point for how I've tried to frame it is Rakirangi Gage talks a lot about the whakapapa of an idea, and some of you might have heard him talk about in our current world, as we're trying to explore things that matter, we've got to trace the ideas to ask the question, are we trying to put Cinderella's slipper on Rangi's foot? Because in his view, lots of the things that end up happening to us are because people are trying to put Cinderella's shoe on Rangi's foot. And so the purpose of a literature review, I don't think Rakirangi probably does that many literature reviews, but what he encourages us to do is to be able to trace back whose slipper are we talking about? Do we want to use that slipper? Do we need to resole it or wholly remake it so that it fits Rangi's foot? That's the purpose of literature review thinking, really. Whose slipper do we want to And so I think of literature reviews as a process and a product that is about tracing the whakapapa of an idea. So that's how I want to approach the content today. And I'll talk a little bit about what they are and how to do them and distinguishing between types and going through the process of writing. All the way sitting with that, we're talking about the whakapapa of ideas. And many of us are masters at whakapapa. So when we're coming into this world of literature reviews, I think we're actually really powerfully skilled up to do beautiful literature reviews because they're tracing whakapapa and finding connections, everything that's a literature, the purpose of a literature review is something that we do in our contexts, in our ways, with class and protocol and elegance regularly. So it's about bringing all of the ways that we do whakapapa and bringing them into that different context, um, rather than thinking that we've got to borrow someone else's process for doing a literature review, use the things that we've already got in our kete and deploy them to doing just beautiful and powerful and exceptional literature reviews. And before I get on to all of that, Heidi, if you could please push the buttons to the next slide. Would really value you just dropping in the chat a number about how confident you feel about doing literature reviews, or how much you love literature reviews or the whole idea of it, with 1 being not great and 5 being it's my jam and I'd just love to do it on a Sunday. Yay. So we've got the full range from this is tedious sock hanging to I would choose to do this because I love it. And that's fabulous. So the people that are in love with it, please feel free to drop in the chat as we go through your hacks and tricks that have enabled you to fall in love with literature reviews. And for those that are still searching for the love of literature reviews, feel free to drop in the comments about this is what I find agonizing or tricky about doing literature reviews. Heidi, if you could please jump us to the next one. So I think that one of the things that can help with a literature review is getting really clear on what you're trying to do and using the kind of language that is in our communities a lot. A literature review should be the geeky equivalent of tupuna inspired and mokopuna driven. In the tupuna inspired part, what you're trying to do is connect where you fit into a legacy of work. And in terms of mokopuna driven, what you're trying to do with a literature review is paint the contours of how your idea contributes. And I want to talk about each of those bits in turn. Heidi, if you could please jump us to the next slide. So the in that looking back purpose of a literature review, you're trying to find the kind of the lines that you come off and the gaps that you're occupying. And there will be, if you think about in your own personal context, when you turn up somewhere, the thing that you first do is find your connections in the room And if you happen to be in a bridging place between different ones that are in the room, or um, if you're a product of curious relationships in the room, that finding the landscape, that kind of web of the network of ideas, is the purpose of a literature review. And being able to locate ourselves amongst a web of relationships is what we do every time we turn up somewhere. So this connecting ourselves within a web is really familiar. And so it's about taking that thinking and then with slightly potentially less heart-filling purpose to it, to identify the gap or the place of bridging that you want to do. So the kind of common research gaps that we talk about are the ones that are listed there: knowledge, population, evidence or empirical. Has something been sufficiently proved or verified? A methodology, a way of working stuff out, or a theoretical gap. So for the kind of first orientation point, um, you when you're looking back about how you fit into a legacy of work and a legacy of ideas, you're trying to say, am I coming in as the portaki who wants to fill a gap in one of those things? Or am I coming in from a tuakana line that is occupying this kind of space? It's about that orientation point and where there is space for you, because there's always space for you somewhere. And one of my favorite TED talks about how there are no original ideas in the world, but there are some mighty fine remixes. So kind of that tracing your way into the tupuna inspired legacy of work is working out which riffs you are bringing together in a new, unique way to remix. That's um, the how you trace the gap, the invitation that you are taking up to do work. On the other side, on the Heidi, next slide, please. On the mokopuna driven purpose of doing a literature review, you're trying to then also use your literature review to paint that really clear picture of how does your idea contribute to something new, a new frontier. So first question, why does this work? Why does it matter? Why should anyone pay attention? And then how it contributes. So you on the tupuna side, you've traced where you fit in a legacy, and then your literature review also helps the reader work out why they should give you the gift of their time. Is that landing okay? That to be able to move on to the next bit? Has anyone got any responses or questions, nudges? Good. Nā mihi whānau. Heidi, if you could please click the button. So I think that there's lots of different ways of visualizing what a literature review can look like. And so one of the ways I think about it is about if you're in a forest, because really the world of ideas is in lots of ways like the ngahere, and you're looking up at the canopies, and all of the canopies of the trees are they're touching each other, and sometimes you can't quite tell where one tree starts and another finishes and all of that kind of stuff. For the purpose of a literature review, it's about looking up at the canopy and being able to work your way through the ways that those trees of ideas connect to each other. So with that kind of way of thinking about it, this is a really rough, scruffy way that some of the trees and the things that I think about fit together. So broadly, the canopy that I'm working on is about working under, sorry, is about how do we work out what a good life is, and then how do we train the government to do better things so that everybody can live a good life, and how do we provide supports to iwi and Māori organisations to have some tools that are useful for how they contribute to their uri having a good life. And so kind of one of the trees that I draw from is Western thinking. And you can, if you go right back to the furthest away part of the tree in that, you can trace it to Aristotle and his ideas about what a good life meant. And then there's all different ways that different important thinkers have riffed off Aristotle's thinking. So I want to be able to trace along that kind of tree. But then on the other side, when we look into our knowledge systems about what a good life is, there's some of the Maina Atua inspiration and knowledge that can draw from. There are particular tupuna's work that I might want to draw from, like Te Ramoruhu, and how he frames the nature of a good life and how we might get there. And more recent thinkers like Tā Mason with Wharetapawha and his later work, which have got enormous contributions into that space. And then with the literature review process, what I'm trying to do with all of that work is trace the relationships between those different trees, and then coming down the bottom, it's kind of that's the mokopuna driven part. So if I can understand all of these ideas and the relationships between them, what can I do with that? How does that matter? That's the mokopuna driven part. Can trace these ideas to then contribute to public policy or to contribute to how we think about social impact and social innovation and that kind of stuff, which is my jam. And off to the side, the OECD and Wales boxes are all about what are the kind of distant cousins worth of work that's going on in the real world. That's kind of how I think about how my trees fit together. And depending on what I'm doing, I might bring in more trees, or I might just focus on one tree's worth of knowledge, depending, on the nature of the thinking that I'm doing, the nature of the gap that I might want to explore, or the type of research that I want to do. So if I think on the next slide, Heidi, there is different types. Yeah, so this is the different types of literature review that you might end up doing. Unless you are a super geek, I would avoid systematic literature reviews. I'd just avoid them with lots of, unless you're a super geek with high levels of patience. So that, so you've got one, the narrative kind of literature review is about weaving connections in a way that kind of, traces the trajectory of a particular tree. Systematic literature reviews are pretty much about describing all of the trees in the ngahere that relate to your particular topic. You've got to go wide and deep and be really structured and uptight. Scoping literature reviews are the ones that I like because they're really focused on the being able to see the landscape but not getting too deeply into it. So it's that big picture. And the other one I really like is the conceptual because that's really about exploring the whakapapa of the idea. So with the trees that I've shown you, a conceptual one might be interested in drawing the connections between what Amartya Sen and Papa Manuka Hinari, how they connected into Aristotle's approach to virtue ethics and being like it will go into um, the the deeper thinkings and contextual morality that shaped how they approached it. Um, so yeah, I think for for lots of kaupapa Māori work, I don't know if I've seen many kaupapa Māori systematic literature reviews. I think we're predominantly in the other spaces about the types of literature reviews that we're doing. And the only thing that helps you know what type of literature review you're doing is the nature of the research that you're up to. So if you're doing more theoretical, like if you've got a real weight on theoretical, you're probably going to be more in the conceptual or the scoping space. If you're doing potentially more practice-based work, you might be more in the narrative space. And for most people, I'm not sure, apart from systematic, how intentional they really are about the type of literature review that they're doing, as long as you're clear about whether you're doing systematic or other. You can probably keep it there, but it's always helpful to have these ideas in the back of your head as you're thinking about what you're trying to do, which is the next bit to jump to, please, Heidi. Which is whatever type you're doing, apart from systematic, which is more detailed but still broadly similar. What you're doing in a literature review is just whakapapa. That it can get really, you can describe it in really complex ways, but what you're trying to do is trace whakapapa and explain the connections between different lines. And on the next slide, Heidi, is what I think the kind of orientation points are for doing literature reviews. So you know how, and when we're doing whakapapa, you're trying to connect back to the eponymous tupuna that is going to resonate with your audience. So when you're all at home, you're closer. You don't go so far back to find that um, eponymous ancestor type person, but when you are going further afield, then you go back further because you need to go back further to find those points of connections. And the same kind of thing applies to a literature review about how far you might want to go back to find that eponymous ancestor. You want to be able to, for ideas that are related but different, when we're describing which litter of kids came off which marriage, like it's the same kind of thinking when you're trying to distinguish between this particular cluster of thinking and that cluster of thinking. You're showing, those kind of interrelationships. I think one of the examples that the algorithms fed me the other day was it was talking about a group of philosophers at a particular time, and you had existentialists and I think the nihilists. I don't know, that's not my jam, but the algorithms think it is. And when he was talking about it, he was talking about how both of those groups of philosophers would party together, but they went off in these two different directions. So they partied together, they had this central idea, but then one took that idea and went that way, and one took that idea and went the other way. And it's the same kind of way that we might talk about a whānau where you've got one of the parents that is the same and then one of the parents that's different, and how they went off in different directions as a result. Which then leads into in your literature review, being able to see and explain the tensions, the points of tension between them, where they connect and where they depart. Who, if there is a thinker in the middle of different thinkers who is like that Tomo, who that brings them together. So in a really practical sense, from the things that I think about, have got when I'm thinking about what is a good life, on one side there's Adam Smith, who might not be someone that people on the call think about, because he's like the godfather of modern capitalism. So if we do think about him, it might be more about shooting darts at his work. And then on the other side is Amartya Sen, who's an economist philosopher type who lots of Indigenous people have drawn on in their work, because he's about human capabilities and human development with a real justice driver to it. And so you put those two up together, and at first blush, they look like they're on opposite ends of thinking about what a good life is. But actually, they've got this common idea about being able to create societal conditions which are really humanistic. Adam Smith, actually, despite being the father of modern capitalism, had a real kind of moral driver to how he approached capitalism. It's just that he went off and fell in love with this idea of free markets as the way to achieve moral purposes. Whereas Amartya Sen, so he shares that kind of humanism and that driver for moralism, but he does it in a different way. And yeah, so you want to be able to trace in how you are seeing the whakapapa of different ideas, where they connect, or where someone has come along and made the bridge between these things that look different but actually have some kind of hongonga between them. You also want to be able to trace in your literature review the real turning points in thinking. So when we had various points when Otupana split off and founded their own hapu or whatever happened, that kind of turning point that is really significant on where our communities might have ended up parking up or doing the things that we did, is the same thing when we're tracing the whakapapa of an idea. What was the thinker or the contextual thing that happened that created a really sharp departure point, or landing space for a different idea? So I think in the kind of things that I think about, what is a good life? So that the creation of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights would be one of those kind of turning points that I might talk about, and the nature of the context at that time. The UDHR came out of World War II, and there was, as we know, some pretty clear drivers that created that turning point in how we approach the whole nature of a good life and what are the kind of institutions we need for people to have good lives. And within all of that, while you're tracing these lines and these interconnections, you're kind of marking your affiliations as well. Who are you loyal to? Who are you suspicious of? Who's that cousin that you haven't quite sussed out yet? You know, like that's what you're doing and how you present it. Um, does anyone have any anything that they'd like to say out loud or drop in the chat before we kind of shift gears more into the practicalities of literature review things? We're good. Heidi, could you please press a button? So, what's some practical things to help you do a literature review? Um, these are just my ideas. This is how I think about it. So you got to start with the questions, which isn't as narrow as your research question. I think was there another session, Heidi, on research questions and framing them? Um, so yeah, you got to start with your questions about which branch of the whakapapa am I exploring? And I think everyone will have a different process for how they might want to get some inspiration to work out what the questions are that they really want to explore, and then to try and get a feel for the landscape. My one is that I read really widely, so I forage widely, and I do it really fast to start with. So that because I want to get a feel, I want to get the big picture, I want to see how things connect. That is the kind of quick flick in jotting things down kind of stage of a literature review. And then the second part is to find those anchor point thinkers, those equivalents of significant tupuna in the intellectual world, and go really deep into understanding them. So on the first one, the reading wide and fast, I might get through 20 different things in a day because I'm flicking and I'm taking hardly any notes across readings. But when I'm on to step two of being able to connect really deeply with those really important works, it might take me a couple of days to get through a single reading when I'm thinking really deeply about it. Yeah, and I think that kind of different pace of reading is a really important thing to think about. And then the kind of next stage for doing a literature review is, at least for me, would be where I'm trying to work out the relationship between things. So I'd be drawing lots of pictures. And so I might, with the examples that I've given, I would have an Adam Smith circle and an Amartya Sen circle, and I'd be drawing bits off them about the things that they thought about and the things they thought were important, and then doing different things about if that was the same, if they connected on that, or if they went in different directions about that. If this was like a big mine in the middle of their thinking, and it's the trying to get that web, the equivalent of when you're doing the whakapapa charts and you're going back up and you're connecting across. It's that kind of process of being able to hold the relationships as something that you can see or feel or hear in your mind, depending on how your mind works. And then the final kind of stage in the literature review process would be the equivalent of picking your favorite auntie, even if you don't want to say that out loud very often, about working out the in that kind of map of how everything connects to what do I feel a sense of love and affinity for? What am I absolutely allergic to? And the ideas that are coming forward. And then what are the things where I'm just not quite sure how I feel about that or what I think about that or how that might relate to something else? Because those questions potentially inform either you might need to do some more foraging or they might inform that actually that's the rangahau that you need to do. I don't know what I think about that. So that's the stuff I need to go and do some research on. Yeah, so that would kind of be my process about how to get into the work of doing a literature review. There are definitely people who have more structured ways of doing it. And so the kind of things that I've seen for people's minds that are more structured is they will cover their walls and the in big pieces of brown paper or those big fancy post-it notes or things like that. And so they will box things and layer post-it notes as they're trying to connect ideas and things like that. So whatever your brain says about how you like to think about things, just roll with it. And if you want to move around a room and move post-it notes or scribble on a big piece of paper, the whole we would like literature review processes to be this nice, tidy, read something, write something, it's done. But they never are. The whole value of a literature review is that it should stretch your mind. It should take you into places that you've never been before. And you should need to actively engage with the things and the ideas that you're working with. Um, like, yeah, like the people that you love and care about, and to understand how they fit together and their strengths and their drivers. You're trying to get that familiar with them, that they're like your mates. These ideas become your mates through this process. Or at least they should, except the ones you're allergic to. And you put them on the do not invite list with an explanation. I feel like I'm going off topic. Heidi, could you please press a button? Um, a couple of hacks with a flow diagram that's illegible. I think one of the things that can paralyze us is we feel like we need to know everything. We need to have read everything. And I think it's helpful to sit with the question of, do I feel like I need to read everything because I am genuinely on an intellectual exploration and this will enrich my rangahau? Or do I feel like I need to read everything because I feel anxious and shy about doing this mahi rangahau in the first place? Because the first reason is you are one of those rare people who loves systematic literature reviews, and you are to be celebrated as a rarity. And if it's the second one, you just need to have a chat to your inner imposter syndrome voice. Because I think lots of us come into this world of rangahau feeling like we are not enough and have to prove ourselves as being good enough to do this thing. And to that, we just say all of the revolutionary things that we put on t-shirts, because literature reviews are not about proving the legitimacy of your ideas. Your ideas are legitimate. The purpose of a literature review is to contextualize the power of your ideas. And I spent lots of time talking to people with that kind of vibe. And then I went and did postgrad at a fancy place and totally fell into that imposter syndrome approach to literature reviews. So I don't think it matters how many grey hairs you have. We're all at risk of having that kind of imposter syndrome. Um, I've got to prove that I'm smart enough to read these things. I've got to prove that I've done enough due diligence to have the creds to have an idea. And every time you can hear that backing track in your brain, just scratch the hell out of it and throw it out the window, because I think that's one of the greatest risks for how we do literature reviews, is that we will say, this fancy person said this, and here's my idea, and because it's related to that fancy person, it must be a good idea. But when you're doing a literature review, what you're actually doing is owning your voice. You want to reorient it more to, this fancy person said this. Here's some value in that fancy person's idea, and here's some not value in whatever the appropriate and context relevant way is. Here's the limits of that person's thinking, and the mahi that I'm doing extends in this direction, and it matters, and it's valuable, and it stands. And I think that particularly when you're down in the working out ideas and where you fit, it's so easy to fall into the small voice rather than owning your powerful voice. So yeah, that's my kind of hack for, you don't have to read everything, and you are not there. You are there to have, in that mokopuna driven spirit, to have the strongest voice you can have to contributing to something that matters. So you don't come in on bended knee. So that's the empowerment part. And then the potentially not so inspiring part is that I have never done anything in the literature review space where it was all nice and tidy and just done. It was very much a rinse and repeat of read, think, forage, get lost, want to cry, draw another picture, tidy it up. Yay, it all makes sense. Read something else. Oh, it's all fallen apart again, and I don't quite know how it fits together. And that loop can go on for a while, because things, you know, these things will evolve in your brain. They will go through phases of tidiness and messiness. And don't freak out when it feels too messy and too hard to hold in your mind. And like I have exactly the same relationship with real whakapapa. I find it really hard to hold in my mind. And I think one of the reasons for that is I need to um, I need to feel the identity of someone, and if I can't feel that, I can't retain the information. And so it's the same kind of thing with ideas, but to make sense to me, there's got to be a feeling that goes along with the thought, and the feelings move and all of that kind of stuff. And you will have maybe some similarities, maybe some differences in what it is you need for an idea to take, like to be anchored inside your brain in a fixed point where it will always make sense and you can track a relationship to them. So don't panic if it takes time to get to that, it's finally solidified. Really practically, do allow time when you're doing a literature review for that kind of process to happen. Heidi, if you could move to the next bit. Thank you. Which is once you've gone through that process, the writing. When it comes to the writing of a literature review, what are you trying to do? And you kind of got two different ways of describing what you're trying to do with writing a literature review. One is the picture of which is the triangle version of a whakapapa chart to you, and then a more descriptive, fluffy version, which reflects the way my brain thinks, potentially too openly. That when you're writing a literature review, your purpose, like we talked about at the start, your most direct purpose is to show why your rangahau, whatever it is, matters, why it's important, how it contributes. And to do that, you've got to start wide and come down. And I think in a really practical sense for lots of you who go to hui about any kaupapa that's been going on for a while, you'll be really familiar with, and if you start the kōrero right back at the beginning of where the kaupapa started, you will get to an outcome. If you try and leapfrog in a hui process, all of those things that came before that particular hui, the conversation will just end up going round and round in circles. Is that familiar? That feels like very familiar to me. And it's the same kind of thing with writing a literature review. You want to go right back. Mai rā no. You don't have to do it deeply, but you do want to start wide so that by the time you come down to your lane, your space, it feels like you have tidily channeled people there with them wanting to follow your flow and wanting to follow your placement, rather than, if you think about those hui, when you don't acknowledge all of the how you got to that hui, there's someone who wants to kick something down because they don't feel like they've been heard or seen, or their thing that they care about has been suitably valued. And with at least academic readers, they've all got that same kind of dynamic happening. There is some theory or some writer that they love to pieces, and if they can't see that writer, thinker, whoever it might be, and how you're doing your literature review, they'll get all grumpy and critical on you. And they're not really going to engage with you because they've already gone, oh no, I'm checking out. You missed something. So yeah, you want to go wide, but you don't have to, you don't give every intellectual tupuna the same degree of attention and word count, but trace it enough so that they can see it. And the kind of bits that you'll go through, and this is, this is a traditional academic structure that you don't need to feel bound by. And particularly if you're doing more of a narrative style, it will have, it won't be quite that blocky. But big picture, the tensions that come up in people who are thinking about that stuff, what are the issues that they keep debating? Where does the state of the art is about, where's the kind of convergence of thinking at the moment? What do you think about that? And this is really important. So you might weave a little bit of the kind of talking back to the literature in the earlier bits of it, but you want to have a really clear your voice, but where you're saying across all of this big picture, these are my thoughts about it. This is missing. This is overcooked. This is undercooked. And I missed the salt over here. And you need that voice to be strong and clear enough so that by the time you get to the next bit about what's your research gap, what are you contributing to the world, you've effectively created your own invitation for that to be something that needs to be done in the way that you framed the literature review. Yeah. And I'm really happy to pause there or to keep going. There's only one more slide. So which is a slide with questions on it for you guys. Thank you, Heidi. So and really it's about, so if that's my lens on what a literature review is, we'd be really keen to just open up the conversation for what, when you're doing literature reviews, if you're about to do ones that you have done, what is it that you feel good about? What is it that feels tricky? And what do you need? And what would it be helpful to talk about?
I can go first. Yeah. Kia ora, thank you so much. It's really reassuring. Okay, yeah, we can do it. I can do it. What feels tricky for me is that at some points in time, doing some literature review, I get confused or kind of feel tricky when um, the publications are from different countries or different social settings or countries or context, and then some of the insights I really like, but then I'm thinking, if I'm taking very teeny bit insights which I think are relevant, the whole is not relevant because that's another part of the world. Especially in social sciences, I think maybe for, I really envy health sciences or physical sciences people, because for them gravity is the same all around the world. But for us, yeah, so that's where I feel tricky, that should I include countries with more or less yeah, that's my tricky part. And the feel good part is the it being a secondary research and not worrying about funding and keeping up the rhythm of research alive, like feeling independent, sitting on the computer with really good search engines these days, a lot of literature out there these days, and keeping the rhythm of research and the spirit of research alive to whichever extent I have time, and not worrying about a lot of funding to conduct a research. So yeah, that's me. Namihi.
Namahi, thank you for going first and opening the bidding. I think I don't have a magic funding wand, so I'll just hope for that as much as you do. I think that the comment about publications from different countries and what do you pick, I reckon that's another really wonderful kind of personal orientation to the world of research. So we will all know and love researchers who make a decision to only refer to Indigenous authors in their literature review kind of component, or some that make a decision that they're going to privilege wahine voices because of the nature of their research and things like that. And I think that in whatever your field, there will be different schools of thinking. And if you want to, you just pick a particular affiliation, and then within that affiliation, you might narrow it further and pretty much own, I'm taking a particular position to privilege these guys' voices because you think they matter. And I think that and the great thing about that kind of decision is that you can take it for one piece of work that you're doing, and then if you change your mind, you can change your mind and do something different on the next thing that you write. So for one kaupapa, you might say, I am only going to draw on literature that's come from Indigenous and Global South contributors because that's the nature of work that I want to do. And I acknowledge there's this whole other body of work out there, and you acknowledge it and then kind of move on. And then for another piece, where you might want to, I don't know, do a big serve at the Global North, you focus your literature review on them so you can have a better serve pretty much. So, and I think that part of owning your voice is making decisions about those kind of things, which can feel very scary and adulty, which is why it's great you can change your mind.
Kia ora.
Maybe I'll go next. I just he mihi, really. This has helped kind of demystify the whole what is a bloody literature review. Somehow in anything any academic pathway, I've managed to avoid literature reviews. So just and probably I won't be able to do that for much longer if I'm serious about going down the path that I want to go down. But yeah, it certainly helped take that level. It made gave it a lot more practical and frameworks that I can relate to. That's like, oh wow, that makes it kind of I can do that. And yeah, it's been really helpful just engaging in the space, I guess, getting me prepared for the journey ahead. So thank you. We'll hang out some more.
No, mate, I would love to have a cup of tea about your PhD.
Oh yes.
And I did intentionally say that PhD word out in public, so now that lots of people will ask you about it and say affirming things.
Cool. I've actually Hannah reached out to me, Hannah Rapata, and then she's put me in touch with Kitty Edge. So and I'm gonna set up a regular time slot, I think, to connect with Kitty too. So but yeah, I'd love to hook up and yeah, have a bit of a wānanga over a cup.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Kia ora, Sasha. I've got a question. Aroha mai, I'm a bit late into the room. But I just wanted to know, and you might have answered this, and because I'm late, I might be asking something you've already covered. But when you do your literature review and you are searching and you find literature that's interesting but not on the kaupapa you're kind of looking for, what do you do with that literature? Do you have like a database, or how do you keep fresh in your mind what the literature is about and leave it for another time? I'm just interested in more like literature review databases. Do you have one?
I'm the wrong person to ask that question to, because my filing system is spread between multiple devices, things, none of it's proper. And I'm not sure whether it's inappropriate, but now I consistently ask AI to organize my reference lists alphabetically. So I am the scruffy version of that, and there will be people who have got much better disciplines. I have this is my organizing system for different bits of literature. It's like pictures and flow diagrams, and I just sit with it a lot. I think I just aged myself and became an old school researcher.
Go, Catherine, go.
There's just with my librarian hat on, there are some literature management software programs available that you can use. There's one that's quite good that's freely available called Mendeley. And you can do things on that. You can use it for putting your references into Word, but you can also use it for storing your PDFs and putting notes on them and things like that. So actually, I'll pop the URL in the chat, so you might want to have a look at that for those of you who are interested.
Mendeley is in my life goals, but possibly not aligned to character type.
Your friendly campus librarian for Mendeley. Hapo, I think. Any other pātai? Kōrero? Got everyone joining us, talking quietly behind us now. There's about
And our room was probably about another 6 people
listening in, but off camera.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's tricky. Can I just say one kind of concluding comment, which is more on the don't be scared of literature reviews, and don't be scared of diving into all kinds of obscure ideas, and obscure ideas written by people whose lives are different to yours. Like, because I think that when you're in the literature, if effectively you're finding your geek tribe, that's what you're looking for. And there is a geek tribe that you belong to. And there's also a geek tribe that will want to celebrate your voice. So as much as it might take a deep breath to find your voice, to hold your space in this world of intellectual inquiry, that there is space for you. And more than that, I think it's really important we remember that the reason we want to do this mahi rangahau is because in some way we want to change the world. And your driver is because you believe that there is an idea or a thing that you're in love with that will make the world better for tō tātou mokopuna. So when you don't hold your voice, you slow the progress to realizing those mokopuna realities. Not only is there a geek tribe that wants to celebrate your voice, there are mokopuna that need you to own your voice. So don't be scared of those multi-syllable words and fancy degree writers, because as brilliant as their contributions might be, yours match them. And they might come from less tidy life pathways, but that only makes your contributions richer and more nuanced and more meaningful. So every time we have that, I am less than someone with a fancy degree from over here, just cut that shit out, because you are more than. You come with a whole bunch of textured living and intellectual armory, which means that what you bring has got more depth and power than any of those people with nice, tidy, straight line life pathways. And there are people born and unborn that are relying on you to make the contributions that you want to make. It takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes an intellectual village to change the world. So don't be shy. We want you and we need you, and you are more than enough to do everything that you want to do. So nā reira, tēnā rā koutou.